Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in. Maybe, Kevin, if you could just introduce yourself officially, so that we have that.
Sure. So officially, my name's Kevin Rothrock, and I am the lead translator and editor for the English edition of Meduza, which is a kind of hipster, cool, neat website that is sort of modeled on kind of BuzzFeed News, I think, but they don't do like the kind of listicle stuff that you see on BuzzFeed proper. But I would say that the news coverage is similar. But it's meant to appeal to sort of the next generation of news consumers in Russia. And I am the guy in charge of the English language edition. And so I spend most of my time translating their medium and long form reports, but then I also assemble a newsletter every weekday morning. And I won't be doing it tomorrow because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But yeah, so that's like, usually I'll find like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 stories that capture kind of the like most interesting or important news that has happened in Russia, basically in the 24 hours since I've written the last newsletter. And I would say that it focuses mostly on kind of this is true of English Meduza's coverage in general, is that we focus mostly on kind of cultural and political stories. I mean, if there's something really important happening in terms of like finance or economics, we'll cover that as well, just because it seems so, important. But I don't think that's really our big focus, because there are a lot of people already working on that. That's one of the areas in journalism that is still quite lucrative, and because, there's money at stake. And so that's not really those are not necessarily the stories that we're going to focus on, at least that I'm going to put, my efforts into.
So we've referenced Meduza like a fair amount on the show, but you've described kind of like what it is in relation to American media. Could you just explain like where it stands on the ideological spectrum within Russia and how it compares to other media outlets?
Yeah, so I mean, the project got started a few years ago, and when it first started, it was basically brought together by Galina Timchenko, who was the former chief editor of this very popular website called Lenta.ru, and it's still a very popular news website. But she got forced out in what was effectively a sort of political scandal, where the website it basically was in danger of losing its media license because it sort of didn't play ball with what the rules, the unspoken rules of reporting in Russia are, the political rules, I mean. And I think the final straw was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was a story that included a hyperlink to some kind of so-called extremist materials relating to Ukrainian nationalists or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so the chief editor was forced out when that happened. And then the lion's share of the newsroom resigned in protest. And so many months later, they all reassembled, or not all of them, but a good number of them reassembled in Riga, Latvia, to create this new website called Meduza. And obviously the decision to relocate to Riga the entire reason for doing that was to get outside of Russian legal jurisdiction, so that they can't have their newsroom raided. And so politically speaking, that genesis of the website obviously gives it a reputation for being, oppositionist, I suppose, but that's not how Meduza sees itself, at least when you talk to the people running the actual project. They see themselves as independent journalists, and so they would not embrace the idea that they are oppositionists. And so they're not out, their content is not like something you'd find on Kasparov.ru or some kind of, or even Grani.ru. Like literally, those are literally oppositionist websites where all they essentially do is collect news that's meant to show, how bad the Kremlin regime is, and collect op-eds about how bad the regime is. And Meduza they don't even have an op-ed page. There's no, and they only come out with editorials fairly rarely when there's some kind of major arrest or something like that. And you can read those editorials. I think I try to translate all of them, and so we can go back over the last few years and even read them in English, and you'll see that there's generally a kind of liberal skew to those editorials. But the long form reporting and so on, I would describe as an effort at independent journalism, where you're looking for voices and perspectives that are not generally empowered. So Meduza's, I would say they've led the way with some competition from maybe Novaya Gazeta, but I still think when it comes to some of the more interesting LGBT stories and women's rights issues as well, Meduza and Novaya Gazeta are both kind of leading the way and doing these long form reports where you're covering issues and perspectives that are just are kind of threatened and persecuted in Russia. And so that kind of coverage in general, it's going to rub lots of people the wrong way. It's going to make, I mean, especially the LGBT stuff, I would say that a lot of people probably look at Meduza as just like a place where journalists cover all the weirdos and occasionally write an editorial that's unkind to the establishment. And so people are going to be dismissive of that. But I think it's if you're not doing reporting on market trends, then this is the best kind of journalism you can be doing.